Hi, this is Stanley, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my piece, Huapango de los Muertos, for trombone and string quartet. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the piece came about and what my thinking was behind the piece. I'm not going to get too technical with music theory type stuff. I may do something like that in a future video, particularly once we get closer to the premiere of the orchestral version of this piece, which I'm working on. This piece was commissioned by Dr. William Haugeberg, who is a trombone professor at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. I originally met Bill at the beginning of 2018. Previous to 2018, I was living in Mexico, and I decided at the beginning of 2018 that I wanted to move back to the States in order to help further develop my career as a musician. And I spent a couple of months in McAllen, which is a border town, playing with a banda sinaloense band called Banda XL. And I stopped by the university a few times, and I happened to meet Bill Haugeberg, who teaches trombone there. And in fact, he's one of the people that influenced me to come to Dallas. I originally had my sights on Austin. I was thinking I would move to Austin. But after talking with several different people who had lived in Austin and in Dallas-Fort Worth, I felt like Dallas-Fort Worth was probably the best place for me to go. And looking back, I do believe it was the right decision. So fast forward a year or so, back in March of this year, 2019, I got a message from Bill about commissioning a piece for him. He was putting together a program of music for trombone and string quartet that he was planning on performing at the International Trombone Conference in Muncie, Indiana. This happened back in July. And the entire program was for trombone and string quartet. So Bill wanted me to write a piece for that particular instrumentation that he could put on that program. And the only stipulation was that it be between like 5 to 7 minutes or so. So at this point there were two stipulations. There was number one, the instrumentation, trombone and string quartet, and number two, that it be between 5 and 7 minutes. And the third one I actually asked him. I asked him if he wanted a piece that was more lyrical and beautiful, or if he wanted like a more energetic and lively piece. And he responded that he was looking for something a little bit more energetic and lively to help balance out the rest of the program. So then that became the third stipulation, something that was energetic and lively. And now out of that, there's an implied fourth stipulation there, because he said that he wanted it to balance out the rest of his program. He said he had plenty of stuff that was beautiful and lyrical, so he wanted something that was more energetic. So if you have a program that's largely lyrical and beautiful, and you have one piece that's more energetic, you're probably going to close with that piece. And in fact, that's actually what he did. So that means that the piece has to sound like the kind of piece that's going to close a program. That means it's got to have a big, exciting, rousing coda at the end of that piece. So those were basically my four stipulations. So from there, it was a process of deciding what direction I'm going to go in, because even with those restrictions, there are still so many different possible directions you can go into. And for me as a composer, it's hard to generate ideas if I'm not really clear about what the piece is about. So I almost always have a pretty clear idea before I even write anything down about what the piece is about and what it's going to do. So as I started brainstorming ideas for what would be appropriate, it occurred to me about where he was teaching UTRGV in the Rio Grande Valley. The Rio Grande Valley is just north of the border from Mexico, and it's very highly Mexican influenced. It's a very much of a Mexican culture in that southern part of Texas, dating back to before Texas even existed. I felt that would be very appropriate to do something that was Mexican influenced because of geographically where he's teaching at. Also, because of my history, I don't have any Latino blood or any Mexican blood, but I'm married to a Mexican woman. I lived in Mexico for 5 years, so I felt like I could authentically write something that was Mexican influenced without it being seen as cultural appropriation. At least I hope not, because at this point, tengo Mexico en la piel también. So moving on, once I came up with that idea, if you combined the idea of something Mexican influence with something energetic and lively, was very much a short leap from there to it being a dance of some sort. There are all kinds of very lively traditional Mexican dances, the most famous probably being the Mexican hat dance. The Huapango is also very well known, maybe not so much outside of Mexico, but definitely inside of Mexico, even though it's from a particular region and not the entire country. I mean, I didn't really see too many Huapangos when I was living in Monterrey, but a Mexican composer by the name of Jose Moncayo wrote a Huapango for symphony orchestra that has become part of the standard repertoire and part of the cultural consciousness of nearly every Mexican. In fact, even among Mexicans who don't really listen to a lot of classical music or don't know anything about classical music, they're going to know the Huapango. It's going to be recognizable because it's played all the time, particularly around patriotic holidays. And it's definitely part of the standard repertoire. If you play in a symphony orchestra in Mexico, you're probably going to do that piece at a very minimum at least once a year. So I also knew of that piece, and it was really because of that piece that I decided I wanted to do my own version of a Huapango, do my own Huapango. But I wanted to put my own spin on it, and I wanted to write one that was maybe a little bit more updated, a little more contemporary sounding than the very traditional sounding Huapango by Moncayo. Not traditional in the sense of traditional Mexican music, but in the sense of harmonically what kind of things the piece is doing. So I also thought about the Mexican Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead, and I thought it would be kind of cool to combine those two ideas, as if Los Muertos were dancing a Huapango. And at that point, that's when I knew that I had the concept for this piece, and that's when I was able to start writing and coming up with ideas for the piece. So harmonically in the piece, it's playing around a little bit between major and minor. You could hear the melodies kind of sliding between the two. Harmonically, you hear the conflict of those happening at the same time, the major with the minor. I also incorporate some extended techniques in the piece, and I'm in the process of revising and expanding the piece for symphony orchestra, and it'll be a little bit even more so, using some bold harmonies and some extended techniques to make it a piece that is very much fun and listenable and approachable, with that little bit of dissonance. So you could say that it has a macabre character without it being frightening. And that's kind of the way I see this whole idea of the Dia de los Muertos. It's a little bit macabre, but not macabre in the sense of it, of the horror of it. Just macabre, I guess you could say, in a Tim Burton kind of way, rather than, say, a Wes Craven or Stephen King kind of way. And that's kind of where the piece sits, I think. So I feel very good overall about how the piece turned out. I'm really looking forward to hearing the polished recording that Bill Haugeberg will be doing in December of this year. And as soon as I get that, then I'll be sharing that. And like I mentioned, as part of my residency with the Irving Symphony, I'm making this into an orchestral piece, and I'm really excited about that because I think that this is really going to, this concept is really going to be even better communicated, I think, through the medium of the symphony orchestra. So I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. I'm going to be making more of these in the future. See you soon.